Pray with me now that the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. I got to tell you, I love Halloween. It's been a weird Halloween. But it wasn't so weird as it was a few years ago. Some of you may have heard this story, but some years ago, we were out trick-or-treating on Halloween with a friend and her boys. Same family our children usually trick-or-treat with every Halloween. And my three boys had left their buckets of candy on the doorstep of their friend's house while we went in to get a glass of water and use the facilities. And when we returned, the unthinkable had happened. Somebody had taken all three buckets of my kids' candy and they'd split. My kids had worked for hours gleaning that loot. And in an instant, somebody decided that they needed that candy a lot more than my kids did. And I got angry. I posted a really sour post about it on Facebook. You know that I did. And you know what? We awoke the morning of November 1st, this All Saints Day, to the biggest sack of candy you'd ever seen in your life. It was from my friend Francis Allen. He had delivered it. I'm talking about quality candy here too, folks. I'm not talking about your garden variety Tootsie Rolls and Dum Dums, full-size Snicker bars, Kit Kats, Sour Patch Kids, Skittles. I mean, it was a treasure trove. Francis took the worst Halloween of my kids' lives and he turned it into the best. My friend Francis died 3 years ago, but he lives on as a legend in the memory of my children. He is the real St. Francis of my household. I remember when I was about the same age as my youngest at the time, of the great Halloween candy caper as it's become to known. I was probably, 4 or 5. My parents were driving me to the big metropolis of Jackson, Mississippi for a Sesame Street on Ice show, or maybe it was just Dancing Muppets. I really can't recall, but I do remember the car accident that happened on the way there. The axle to our car broke while we were on the highway, and I remember being marveled at my dad as he kept a cool head and just steered us onto the shoulder. There was a woman that lived nearby. She took us into her home and waited with us until the tow truck arrived. I remember that she was kind and reassuring, and she gave me sweet tea. I can't remember her name or much else about her. What I do remember was her kindness. I think most of us have stories like these. Real people, old friends and strangers alike, who have reached out and assisted us in times of anxiety. Maybe it was just a gentle word or a simple gesture, but it made an impact on our lives, both back then and right now, as we carry those moments with us. We're living in a time now of division and tribalism. And I think we can often forget about the abundance of generosity that lies within all of us. This is a generosity of which all of us are capable. It's a generosity that transcends division, and it speaks to affirmation of justice to every single child of God. In the Beatitudes that we heard this morning, Jesus offers us a vision of this generosity. He offers instructions, if you will, for all disciples of every era on how we might tap into this generosity. But his words can also catch us off guard because they call for a response that is really contrary to what we expect. In the gospel passage, Jesus is reversing the established order of society. He's challenging the hierarchy of the culture that we've become accustomed to. He's kind of usurping the caste system that we live in, if you will. He's lauding and celebrating those who are often deemed insignificant or cast off to the margins of society. He expands the notion of poverty beyond material ownership, and he gets into that realm of the spiritual. Blessedness is not simply happiness. It is peace. It's contentment. It's kind of hard to imagine peace and contentment in the of a pandemic, particularly in a time today that is compounded with injustice and mourning, famine and war and division. There are millions of people on this earth right now that do not feel blessed, nor do they experience a degree of what they would call happiness in their situation. But in places all around the world, many of those that are beset by poverty and hardship are actually facing life with songs of praise and thanksgiving to God. We see this in history. We look back into the Bible, in the Hebrew Bible, in the Psalms, and the Proverbs. We listen to the songs of survival from the Middle Passage and from American slavery, or the songs of the Dalit or the Untouchables of subcontinental India. There's a perspective of celebrating in the midst of oppression that is generally completely unfathomable in the US. Right now, this is where wealth is often considered synonymous with happiness. Yet it's right here in the Beatitudes that we find Christ offering us freedom from that want through blessedness. It's here that Jesus is kind of giving us instructions for sainthood. As today is All Saints Sunday, the day after Halloween, literally the evening before All Saints Day, we celebrate all the saints, known and unknown. Today, we're going to read the litany of saints in our prayers today. And you can add your own saints to our list. Perhaps it's even someone that you've known. If you're watching this live on Facebook or even a recording of this, you can put the names of your saints in the chat window. This is also the same time of the year that the Savannah Film Festival takes place. And I've been going to this festival for 23 years. And there's always something through the art of cinema that connects with this special day. This week, I watched the documentary Francesco. It was directed by my friend Evan. And it's a portrait of Pope Francis. And there's a clutch moment where he refers to the Irish proverb, every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. I know this quote is often attributed to Oscar Wilde, but it's actually much older than that. And the meaning is simple and it's edifying. No one is so good that they have not failed at some point. And no one is so bad that they cannot be saved. All have sinned and all is grace. The only distinction between those who have already received it and those to whom it is still available. I know that this sinner right here can still use some of that grace. All of us have failed in some way. We failed ourselves, we failed others, and we've failed God. And you know what? That's okay. Because God's grace gives us the opportunity to get up, to turn around, and to try it again. It begs us to question how we might be able to open our hearts and our minds towards a vision of communal sainthood that affirms our part in the kingdom, as well as everyone else's. That's the thing. There's not a single one of us that is too far gone. We are entering a very challenging week. It's an election week. And I know a lot of us may have some anxiety about it. But I ask that all of us remind ourselves of the words of Jesus in the Beatitudes that we heard today, so that we might lean into that curve that takes us from sinner to saint. How might we keep God's loving grace and God's call to the service of all of creation at the very center of the decisions that we make? How might we calm ourselves in the spirit and be of service at this time to both protect our most vulnerable citizens and also protect everyone's right to vote? I don't know if this election is going to be over on Tuesday, and I don't know what unrest may follow. I pray that there's none. But if we do encounter unrest or injustice, it is imperative that we do our parts as saints of God's kingdom to safely protect ourselves and one another with dignity. For blessed are the meek. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are those persecuted for righteousness' sake. They're everywhere in our midst. We only need to open our eyes and see them. And Lord, help me to be one too. Amen.